What's up, Sean? Thank you for coming on the show. I know it's kind of last minute. I had another guest he got bad signal, didn't want to waste my time, so I had to go out there and find someone. I'm glad you volunteered.
Hey, no problem. You had actually asked me a little bit ago, and sorry about that. It's been really crazy lately, to
Well,
say
good.
the
Glad.
least.
Well, you're here now. That's all that matters. Gotta introduce. Gotta do me a favor though. It's your first time on the show, man. You gotta kind of introduce yourself, just kind of who you are. Some things you've done in the past, what's going on in your life right now, and not all the fishing stuff because that's why you're here. We know that's what you do. So
Yeah. So my name's Sean Acord. I'm obviously a bass fisherman. We know that much. I'm prior military, just like you. So thank you for your service.
thank you.
I did do a little background check on you just a little bit. I'm a father of three. I've got a 5-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 6-month-old. And so that keeps me pretty busy. On top of working a full-time job for the state of Oklahoma, I also do YouTube and a little bit of Instagram, although Instagram's not really like my primary platform. I try to put most of my content onto YouTube is kind of where I try to focus that at, but I do have some other profiles and social media stuff going on. Prior to that, I did have a little bit of a social media presence with Twitch back in the day, as far as like streaming and things went like that. I did a lot of like charity stuff when I did that back in streaming. I've never really been into content creation for making money as much as I have for like raising awareness to stuff or being able to give back to other people. I mean, you could even look at my YouTube now. I don't monetize anything. I've never made any money off of it. And any donations or anything I've ever received, I've always donated those somewhere else. So, yeah, other than that, that's pretty much me in a nutshell.
Well, cool. Give me 1 second. The little man just bum rushed me. That's it. I got to say goodnight to him. Real
Okay,
quick.
yeah.
All right, love you, buddy. Say bye. He's got to go. He's too cute. All right, cool, man. Let's talk about the YouTube, for instance. How did you actually get into it? I know you say you don't really do anything for profit, but you do put a lot of time into it. And they're good videos, and they kind of they tell your story of what you got going that day, as well as there's some really good things that you can learn from them as well. But how'd you get into it? How did it become an addiction? Those kind of questions.
So I think for me, primarily, obviously, I started YouTube a while back when I did Twitch. So I actually have removed all those videos now. I've made them private just because it's not what I do anymore. I used to game a little bit when I got out of the military, and so that's kind of what I would do. But now, that's okay. I get it. I got 3 kids, so I'm with you. So for me, it became more or less like an outlet to share with people, kind of connect with people.
Yeah.
I'm really into like editing and filmmaking. I'm all self-taught, and I've always kind of just had an interest in doing those things. I wouldn't say I'm like the best editor or the best videographer or anything like that, but I do like to think that I've learned, some over the years in doing those things. But my primary focus with doing that really was, if it ever took off, was be able to be like to give back to the community. It's always been my goal. You can ask people that have known me since I've done it. It's never been about making money. I know that that's an avenue for a lot of people to make money, and that's awesome. I'm glad that a lot of people can make that their job and be successful. But if I could ever get big enough where I could just give back to the community through like giveaways or information or whatever that may be, that's really my focus and goal.
Yeah, YouTube is very new to me. I had no idea I'm doing YouTube. I've been doing a lot with Instagram, but one of the things that I don't know how people get into these things for monetary value, because, like I said, I've talked to some people before. Like, there isn't like a real blueprint to it at all. It's just I don't know how they do it. But one thing that I saw that I like, it was not really anything more than just like the relationships you create, and like kind of the ability to kind of share your story or to share like your journey as you're going through this thing, whether it be fishing or basket weaving or whatever it is that you're into. But it's like, to me, that's been kind of like the big thing. It's like, I mean, there's a bunch of us in this community that are doing the same thing. And, if I can make a video or, a special type of episode that's, whether it's relatable or not, but just kind of, hey, this is where I'm at, this is what's going on in my life. This is what it's for. It's like, it's for everyone to kind of broadcast themselves and share, what's important to them.
Yeah, and everybody's got a different reason for doing it. And like I said, I'm not here to knock anybody if that's their avenue and they've become successful and make that a business or career. That's awesome. I mean, social media is a big thing. being able to be a content creator is a very difficult thing to do. So if you can be successful at doing that, I mean, I commend them for that and their work ethic, because it's not easy, especially as somebody who creates videos and edits videos, and trying to find time to do those things and manage a home life and work and do that kind of stuff can be very, very difficult. So those that can find time to do those types of things, or happen to be in that place in their life where they have that time to do that kind of stuff, I mean, that's great.
Yeah. Well, has it been easy for you, like kind of separating, like, 'cause you're like me, like the fish tournaments, but creating content and making videos, videotaping yourself, whatever it is, like that's like it's a job in itself. It's you're trying to be an angler, but then also trying to do the whole content thing. Kind of like I have a hard time kind of balance that thing, because I find myself playing with a camera, more than I should be playing with a camera, when I should be out there just getting after it. Especially during tournaments, like I got to the point now where I was like, well, I might not take a camera out in the tournament with me, because I don't really need to be worrying about where the sun is. Well, I mean, I do, but not for that reason. And things like that. Have you had like any like obstacles or things that you just kind of like had to like separate from, what you do for YouTube, and like what you do, like just whatever else kind of fishing you do?
Yeah, so I primarily bass fish. That's pretty much all I do. So just a little bit of a backstory is I didn't grow up bass fishing. I grew up being an outdoorsman. My dad took me fishing and hunting and doing those things as a kid. But where I lived, I grew up in Northwest Oklahoma, which at the time didn't have any black bass species. That lake now does, but when I was growing up, it didn't. So the big things there were like walleye, hybrid, sand bass. But I spent a lot of time fishing for catfish, because I had a river that ran behind my house. It was maybe like, I don't know, 2 or 3 blocks away, that I'd go down to. I'd bow fish it in the summer. I'd fish, for catfish primarily was what I did. And then I got out of touch with fishing for a really long time when I went off the military and came back. I picked it up. I'd moved to a different side of the state with my girlfriend at the time, who's my wife now. And, I started watching YouTube videos on how to really catch bass, because I mean, I had caught some bass, like pond fishing stuff, but I never knew how to target them. I never, before I started bass fishing, I'd maybe caught like 2 or 3 bass my entire life as far as black bass go. And so it was really a learning experience for me. I did a lot of bank fishing, like the first year of it, and about a year of doing that, I got into the kayak side of stuff. And so I've just been an avid bass fisherman, whether it's largemouth or smallmouth. I actually prefer to target smallmouth, but where I live in Oklahoma, we don't really have a ton of smallmouth fisheries here. So I usually try to travel to like Maine in the summer. I have a buddy who lives in Maine, and there's some pretty good smallmouth fishing up there, and it's not too difficult to learn how to do it, especially if you fish down here like in the southern states. Like we're used to like stained and muddy water here. You go to states like Arkansas or Maine and stuff, they've got that crystal clear water, so kind of gives me a change of pace and a change of scenery, so that I can learn more than just stained and dirty water. But back to your question, sorry, about that is the filming. Yes. So for me, it was difficult at first. I've been doing it for a couple of years now. I took a long break off of like YouTube and filming and fishing. So I've only been fishing for about 4.5 years, even though I started like 5 years ago, because I took like a 1.5 year break off of like filming and fishing. I was busy. I was working 2 jobs. I had kids. I had stuff that just, life just took over. But yeah, so it is. So, I don't worry so much about like the lighting and things like that. It's more or less just knowing when to kind of turn your camera on and off to kind of preserve that, so you're not having to change like batteries, or you're changing out SD cards. For me, I've got 2 GoPro Hero 5s that I use. I keep one on the back of the kayak now, and I just plug it into a power bank, and I put like a 128 gig card. That's good for like 8 hours. So I just let that one run the entire time. And then the chesty, I also run off a power bank, but that one I will keep on for a while. If I'm not catching anything, I'll turn it off. Might turn it back on a little bit when I like in a new area that I think that the fish could be. And I try to turn it off, after I'm done like measuring, or after each fish, so that I have those cuts already when it comes to editing. So it's already there in those segments. So I don't have to watch 8 hours of continuous video, which GoPro, I think, cuts it down to like 20-minute segments anyways.
Right.
But if you can cut them into smaller ones, it usually is a little bit more helpful as far as editing, because I can know like, hey, this segment I can just delete because it's just me paddling or pedaling or whatever at that time.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't figured like I do mine. I just very like I'll record, and if I start moving somewhere, I'll go back through that and I record. And like unless I caught a fish, I didn't tag it or whatever, I'll delete everything, because I haven't figured out how to make that workload easier for me. The whole editing process is a pain in the ass. When I'm doing the podcast, and obviously I'm like you, I got kids, and so to sit around at a computer and like I haven't found it easy or figured out a way to make it easier. Where going through all the stuff and things like that.
Yeah, and that's just one thing that I do. Like I said, everybody's got their own workflow and what works for them. I just didn't enjoy looking through hours and hours of video, like trying to get to points and maybe missing fish because I didn't make a cut there. So
yeah,
I found when I break it down into smaller files, I can actually watch those and then delete out the ones that don't have any content that I want to use. And then I can just drag the ones that I keep from that file into my workflow, which I use a Mac, so I edit with Final Cut Pro, but I edited with iMovie forever, which is a free program. So you don't really need a paid software. That's just what I use now, just because I like to try to push myself, and I feel like there's a little bit more advanced stuff that you can do with Final Cut that you can't with like the free software.
Well, cool, man. Well, let's get into some things. It's the season's kind of started for a lot of people. I know a few people the season has started like a few months ago, but I live in the Northeast. You live in Oklahoma. I'm not exactly sure when your first tournament was, and I imagine it wasn't that long ago, but getting it back into things, I think is always kind of a difficult thing for a lot of people, like especially me. I went to the lake today just to look because I'm gonna take my boat out for the first time tomorrow, and I just happened to ask the guy like, how cold's the water right now? It's 37 degrees. I'm like, gee, I gotta get back into that, It's like I know, like I'm already dreading it, but I'm feeling better than I did last year about it because I'm like, all right, you're gonna take this rod, that rod, okay, and I'm probably gonna go drop shotting. We're probably gonna go have the drag a jig. We might be able to throw a chatterbait or a square bill up shallow. Maybe there's a few of them, trying to find a warm spot or something like that. But there's a lot of things, it's not the easiest time of the year to get back out there, but you got to do it. I mean, it's just what we do. So, what do you do when the season's about to ramp up again? You're getting ready to do tournaments. You got to start getting back on the water. I know Oklahoma, I'm pretty sure. I think I talked to one of your friends, the worst angler there. Yeah. I think he fishes year round. He says, but it's still it's not a southern state like down in Florida or anything like that. So what's it like getting back into it?
Not even close. And it's funny you say that because Oklahoma is it's really hard to explain Oklahoma if you've never been there. It's a really great, beautiful state outdoors, but our weather is so off the charts. Like 1 minute it might be 70 degrees, the next day we might have a blizzard coming through or a tornado, or so we just don't have a lot of stable weather here. And so it makes it presents an interesting challenge when it comes to fishing. I think it could ultimately makes you a better angler if you're willing to withstand some of those elements to go out there. Be honest with you, this is probably one of the first years I've actually what I would call winter fish. Alex, Oklahoma's worst angler, who you were just talking about, he and I went out because he does fish year round. So I wanted to push myself this year and try a little bit because I'll be honest with you, in the wintertime I hunt. I mean, I'm outdoors deer hunting. That takes up a lot of my time in the winter, so I don't do a ton of bass fishing just because it's cold. To me, the reward doesn't outweigh the risk. If I fall into the water, then I got to deal with hypothermia and other stuff like that. So I get it. In the South, we're probably we're sissies when it comes to the cold weather. I enjoy the cold weather. I just don't. I have to weigh the risks because, just like you, I'm a father too. So I have to consider what's practical and what's not practical. Whereas if I was younger, I'd probably be all for it. I'd probably be out there in shorts or something crazy. But I don't know. This has been an interesting year for me to get back into. So last year was my first year back to tournament fishing after about a year and a half, 2-year break of fishing. And had some pretty good momentum, I felt like, going into the year. So I fished 2 tournaments last year. I fished 3 total, but I fished 2. The first one was the Bassmasters, the new kayak series with BASS, and that one was at Logan Martin. I didn't do terrible given the weather and stuff like that. My downfall probably there was I didn't stick to my plan. I kind of went to a different place. I knew what I needed to do. I didn't do it. I managed to catch some fish. I probably finished in like, the 50th percentile or something, like middle of the road, nothing great. I went to Lake Fork for the first time that following, I think that was in February, and then in March was Lake Fork, and that's right around when COVID hit and everything kind of shut down. So it was kind of like the last in-person tournament before they just kind of shut everything down. And I ended up getting 9th there at that tournament and qualifying for the championship. So I cashed a check there, top 10 finish. And then the following month after that, in April, I did it online with KBF, won that for the state of Oklahoma. I pulled a stringer. I think my biggest stringer I've ever pulled was like 108 inches. I think I caught a 10-pound bass in the month of April for Oklahoma, which is a big bass for Oklahoma. I mean, we have some pretty big bass, but it's not as common as like Texas or someplace like that just has those giant fisheries. And so the momentum was really good, and I thought, okay, well, going into the next ones would be good. But then we had all that layoff, and so I didn't fish another tournament until 2 weeks ago. I fished Broken Bow for a Hobie BOS, which is my first time fishing a Hobie BOS. Great scenario. I mean, it's a great venue, great tournament. I've never fished a 2-day tournament before, and actually, I would say getting prepared for the tournament season, it's always hit or miss, right? It's like you want to knock off the rust, but especially if you haven't tournament fished for almost a year at this point, it's not so much nerves anymore, because when I'm out there fishing on tournament, I'm not competing against anybody but myself.
Right.
I go out to do the tournaments to see what I can push myself to do, what I can accomplish, what things I've learned over the year and can apply here and have helped me become a better angler. I know there's that whole competitive side, but I'm always going to be competitive. I just don't have that drive like I did back in high school and things like that to be like, for me, it's a different type of drive. It's to be the best angler that I know that I can be and to push myself in that direction to get there. And so to get prepared for it's difficult. I think some of the things people think is like, man, I got to buy all this new tackle, and I'm guilty of that. And I spent a lot of years doing that. In fact, that's kind of one of the goals that I've set for myself too, is I'm just not going to buy any more tackle. Because I have so much that I don't use right now that I bought over the years that I literally, it's like every time I go on to make a tackle warehouse order, I go looking around in my box of tackle and realize I already had those baits that I ordered. So I just spent more money on stuff that, I really didn't need to do. So that's been one of my more focuses is focusing on the baits that I do have. And then once those get low and I get to that point, then I can look at that in the future. But I think for me it's like setting. One, it's a mindset. You got to get, if you travel like I do I fish more national tournaments than I do local level. My first year of kayak fishing, I fished local level. I actually spent my first year kayak fishing in Arkansas. I have a brother that lives there, and so I just would fish with him that first year, and that really helped me learn like Clear Lakes and things like that a lot. But I just, besides the mindset of like tackle and like that, I think it's important to realize, am I going to travel? And I'm going to be local. If you're new to it, I would recommend, starting out local, getting to know your local chapter. Those guys can meet a lot of great people doing that. A lot of good things you can learn from the local people. I mean, there's a lot of great anglers that fish locally that just don't have any desire to fish outside of that. And then are some sticks are just, great anglers. And then, getting prepared obviously for the travel, but also game plans, right? You've got to come up depending on the fishery, like what the game plans are. And so it's really, knowledge about the sport, knowledge about the area that you're going to be fishing, knowledge about the different types of lakes you're going to be fishing, because you could have two lakes that are stained, but if one's grassy and one's rocky, those are going to fish different no matter if the water color is the same or not.
Yeah.
And so for me, I think the biggest thing just to get prepared for that is really just preparation, like weeks and months in advance, like preparing myself mentally to get back to that stage, because I think it's very easy to fall out, especially if you haven't done it for a year. Most of the time in a normal tournament season, you're not going to have a year before your next tournament. But adding the pandemic that we had and everything getting shut down and stuff, that kind of added a whole another feature. So I think everybody's workflow on that's going to be different on how they prepare. I know for me personally, these last two tournaments have been the two worst performances I feel like I've ever had fishing tournaments. And I don't think it's because I become like worse at fishing. I just think that it's just different trying to get back into it from not doing it so long. It's almost like, I don't want to say starting over, but it's like that time when I took like a year and a half off, and then I'm taking a year off here to come back and do it. Never stopped fishing, but tournament fishing is different, because maybe the spots that you would fish on your home lake or other places are not pressured where they're going to have 200 kayaks or 200 kayaks in a big bass boat tournament. So you're looking at 300 boats on the water that you've got to compete with and narrow it down to try to pick a place to do that. So just a completely different environment. I know a lot of people, you might be really good at fishing things, but you go to do a tournament and maybe that spot you pre-fished and picked somebody else did and you never saw them there and they beat you to it. Or maybe the fish were there during pre-fishing and get there during game day and they're not. And so you have to try to figure out a backup plan.
Well, one of the things I had to do, because last year, obviously, I think COVID helped me out a lot. As far as like 'cause one of the things that I don't get a chance, if I start the season like tournament, fishing like down south and stuff, I don't start fishing again until I get on one of those lakes. And like last year, I did my first tournament down at South Carolina. Santee Cooper. I've never been there before. And, and it showed like the first day I got there. I got there that early morning because you had to drive through the night. I get there early morning. Had no idea what to expect. I tried to wear shorts and flip flops because I thought it was gonna be spring break down there, and end up being extremely cold down there. And and I spent all this money, all this time. Took off from work. Which is in some ways taken away from my family if it's not done properly. And it's just I got down there and it's just like. And I just wasted a lot of resources to get down here and to do something that I wasn't prepared for. And so it changed the way I kind of looked at like how I approach the tournaments. Do I want to do them? Absolutely. Do I want to do the national ones? Yeah, you bet. But I also want to do them with like a sense of like, okay, I'm doing everything right to put myself in success. I'm not just going down here to fish a national tournament just to say I fished a national tournament and to have a YouTube picture or an Instagram picture with with someone or something like that. So it's like. This year I was like very hesitant. I'm like, I'm gonna wait a little bit. Like the Hobie's coming up here to New York. There's a few tournaments around here. It's like, if I start jumping into these things, for one, like kind of realize like what kind of like how good I was as an angler, like where I need improvements, and like and trying to like weigh all that stuff with like just doing it just because I wanted to do a tournament. It's not that I'm like you. When I look at it, it's like competitive wise, I'm not saying like me and you are competing. I mean, we are technically, but you have nothing to do with what I'm going to – there's nothing you can do to stop me from winning. Like, you're not out there. We're not playing Battleship. You're not, you're lobbing it, missiles, whatever, to ruin my day or anything like that. So it's not that kind of competition. But at the same time, I do want to go down there and try to make up from what, I'm taking from home as far as, like, the financial part of it, the risk taking that you're doing, the gambling that you're doing when you go down there. Like, I want to make it as less luck as I possibly can, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, and like I said, the reason I fish national tournaments, like I said, I'm not by any means like I don't consider myself like one of the best in kayak angling or anything like that. I think anybody can have a good tournament, but like you just pointed out, a good point is like we're not in a competitive sport in the sense like, hey, we're lining up at the starting line at the same time. We're going to sprint to this spot first one there wins. Or I see that you do jiu-jitsu, so we're not tumbling and the first person to tap or whatever to do those things like that. It's not in that sense. And it's almost it's in competition. And yes, you're fishing against other people, but it's almost more of like a mental sport in my mind, just because there's a lot of physical side to it. I'm not saying it's not. Trust me, like the pedaling, the kayaking, but mentally, it like you said, there's a lot of things that go on mentally there as well. It's like, what do I need to prove to myself? How do I get from point A to point B? What did I learn from this tournament? But also balancing that with family life, right? Because like I said, I did those two tournaments. I did the worst that I've ever done. It was a humbling experience. I didn't go there thinking I was going to win it anyways. But I had gone there with expectations that I would hopefully at least, catch a limit or do something, continue with that. In fact, these are probably the first two tournaments in quite a while that I didn't catch a limit on. In fact, the first one was in Broken Bow, which is in Oklahoma, a tournament that I've fished. I fished that like, I don't know, 4 or 5 times over the years. I felt pretty confident in it. I finished in the top 30 in tournaments. There were about 150 people there several times. And it's just one of those things. I was in the right spot, just the wrong execution,
Right.
Same thing with fork. I got top 10, great. Got to the same spot I went to last year. No kayaks, great, but the fish just weren't there. So I had to come up with a plan B. I had a good plan B, but there was more kayaks there. So same thing there. I figured out the pattern. I had the pattern down that the guy wanted on. I'm not going to talk about the pattern because it's not my mind to talk about. But I had the pattern. I had the right area. I just, again, execution and just finding the fish. I just wasn't able to do it. I did get one there that was 20 inches, but that was pretty much it as far as my experience went there. So, yeah, same thing. I don't like traveling a long ways to come up empty-handed.
Right. I mean, I don't mind losing, but it's just like I want to feel like I was, like, you know what I mean? Like when I got there, you know, I had a new fish finder, you know, I had a new graph, you know, I had new rod, you know, and here I am, like I get out, I'm like only 10 minutes into it, the wind's blowing hard, they got all these cypress tree everywhere, every single one of my reels or you know my rods got stuck in one of them, and I'm you know just was not ready to be on the water for that. You know, I mean, there was no like warming up for the show. It's just like, okay, you got 2 days to go pre-fish, and then you got tournament day. But it's, you know, I was just trying to learn how to fish, not fish again, but you know, learning like how to set up my kayak, how to you know set up my graph, and all these things that you know that when I'm at home, it doesn't matter. I'm at home. You know, I go out there one day. All right, that sucked. And then so the next time I go out there, you know, I make corrections, and then but there's nothing on the line. And so I guess I was kind of getting at was like, you know, that's one of the things that sucks about being in the Northeast is like that's it. Like it's February. You know, I went down there to Sandy Cooper. It was, you know, 45, 60, you know, 50 degrees. The water was water. It was, you know, liquid water. Then the day that I got back to New York, everything was still frozen again. I didn't fish again for another month. You know, so it's just like those things that I think about. It's like, you know, take your time. You know, like things start getting better here around April. I'm going out tomorrow to go fishing. You know, like get those cobwebs out, and like if you're gonna do this tournament, do it right. Don't just go out there and you know, like well, whatever. There's people who have different, I guess, goals. They have different financial situations. They got different priorities. You know, where mine was that is this is like no, like coming back from that trip, and I've had a few other trips that like that. Like it just sucked. It's like you didn't even give your chance, you know, the opportunity to really see what you're worth because you're too busy just trying to remember how to do things. You know, I don't know. It's kind of like you just if I'm gonna come back home, with an L, it's like I want to say, well, at least I was competitive, or at least I had an idea and I knew what I was fighting for, and I just couldn't get it to work. Instead of going down, you know, coming back and be like, I had no idea what the hell I was doing down there, and now I got this 12-hour or 16-hour drive back home. I got to stop and fill my gas up 3 or 4 times, you know, and things like that. It's just those are kind of things that kind of dictate like what I want to do when it comes to tournament season now. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people have those same kind of feelings.
Yeah, and I think honestly, a lot of local chapters, anyways, are getting more and more competitive and bigger as the sport grows. So, you know, a lot of local chapters, say like 4 years ago, if you're fishing with like 20 people, 30 people, maybe less, maybe a little bit more, depending where you're at. And now that's double or tripled over the years because now everybody's getting into it. I mean, I really think that there's a good case for local tournaments to be just as competitive as like national level
Yeah.
tournaments. I think
We're doing that in the Northeast. We got the elite kayak fishing that I don't know if you know Jason Gardner from Maine, you know, and Ken Woods and some of those guys they put together, and I'm pretty excited about that because that kind of helped me with how I'm going to do my season because I don't feel like I have to go all the way to Florida right now or all the way to Texas right now. I got a really competitive tournament, you know, that's going to have some pretty high prizes to it. You know, all things considering, and things, you know, and it's going to be closer to home. Like these are going to be, you know, I think my first tournament with them was like 8 hours. So I know I feel like a lot of times we look at people because the sport's so fun and the people in it are so cool. And like one of the best parts about tournament fishing, you know, and kayak fishing is going down to these places and seeing everyone. So it's hard to say. It's hard not to go. Like right now when I see everyone down south, you know, fishing these tournaments, I'm like, I don't even know if I want to fish. I kind of just want to go down there and hang out at least, you know, or something like that, you know. So it's like I feel bad. Like I want to be there. You know, I got this podcast. I talk to all these people all the time. It's just like you don't want to be down there, but at the same time, I got to think about those other things. And so it's nice to have what we're doing now. And I think a lot of other regions are starting to do it too. I know Arkansas's got a really good thing that they're doing there, and with what's his name? I think the Great American Bash. That you know, I got to do a little more research on that, but.
yes, they've got that. Then you know Jeff Malott, he's on the Old Town fishing team with me, and I met Jeff many years ago when I started fishing in Arkansas. He's been around for the scene for a while, and he's always been a great angler and a stick when it comes to competition. But NSKA is pretty big over there. They've got the KBA. They've got a couple different chapters that are running some good programs down there.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that's kind of my little thing, I guess. Like, you know, but we're talking about like what you think and what you're doing. But you know, like, how do you balance it out? Because I know you got 3 kids. I know you got a job and stuff. And so, how do you decide what you want to do with the season? Like, and how do you set your goals up? Because you know, some people are able to, and this is nothing against them. But they have that way of life where they can go there and chase. And you see them every weekend. They're at a new tournament, whether it be a Hobie event, a Bass event, or a KBF event. They're there. But I don't even want to talk about them because it's like we're living two different lives. You know what I mean? And if they were in my shoes, they would know what it's like. And if I was in their shoes, I would know what it's like. So it's not one of those things that is even worth comparing. But someone like you, someone even someone like Jeff, I talked to Jeff Mount a few times about it. It's like this is our life. So like, but we want to do it. So we got to make my whole thing this year was make realistic goals and don't put too much pressure on yourself to feel the need to do everything. Like pick and choose what you want to do. And then who knows? Maybe one day you can do all those things that you want to do because you're cashing first place checks every time or something like that. But how do you balance it out?
Yeah. So, and like you, I was in the military too, and so one big thing for me was probably the one downside I could say about the military. I had a great experience with it, but the one thing I really didn't like was being away from friends and family for long, extended periods of time, no communication, doing those things. So, for me, I wanted to have a family, and I knew the military wasn't going to be the way to do that, just for the fact of me being gone all the time and not being able to have that time to spend with kids. If I were to have them at the time, I have them now, but that was my thought process then. But even for me, I try to pick out maybe like one tournament a month, maybe two if I can swing it, and talk to my wife and let her know, hey, these are the ones I'm kind of planning to do. Fortunately, she works for a family business that they own, so she has the ability to kind of schedule those days off on those, so she could be home if I have those tournaments. But like, for instance, I fished Broken Bow in Oklahoma, and then I turned around the next week and fished Lake Fork. I typically don't like to do that. I had a buddy that came down from Maine who wanted to do both of those, so I did those with him. But typically, I really only had plans to fish Lake Fork, even though I really enjoy Broken Bow, and it's in Oklahoma, because Lake Fork is 3.5 hours from where I live. Broken Bow is like 2.5 hours. So there wasn't much difference between the two. But I was like, okay, well, and one was a 2-day tournament. I never fished the 2-day tournaments, and I was a little on edge about that just because I didn't want to be gone that long, because you talk about the pre-fishing time, and then I've got 2 tournament days, and then I have to drive back a second tournament day, and it ends later in the day, and so I'm getting home later in the evening. I've got to unload everything and then try to spend time with the family. So actually the 2-day tournament I left after the first day just because I didn't do well and I wasn't in the money. There wasn't anything I could do to make up that deficit, so I went back to stay with family. But I try to space it out, like I said, one maybe 2 a month. If that, maybe one every couple of months or so. I try to look at what trail I want to fish, and I try to stick to one trail. Not because I have anything against all the other ones, but there's so much going on, and there's so many all over the place at one time that I could see how you could really get entangled in like being on the road all the time, going different places. And I try to find the one that's got primarily the closest ones driving distance from Oklahoma. I try to stay within like 10-hour drive time one way at the most. Obviously, if it's closer, like Fork or Broken Bow, that would be ideal. But that's what I try to do, just because I don't like being gone for long periods of time from the family. But also, if something were to come up and I had to get home quick for an emergency, I like to be relatively close, or something I can get back in a day or something like that.
Well, I'm kind of like that's kind of how I done things too, because I mean, like I've had Chad on the show and I like him. I felt really bad by why I'm not doing any KBF events this year. I mean, I don't have to, but it's still at the same time, it's just like I don't want to feel like I'm picking one with whatever reason, like I'm biased or thing. But the thing was, is like one national tournament a month is pretty. It's a lot of traveling. There's a lot of resources that go into it. But I'm like you, it's like I don't want to go back on the road the next week. I don't want to, it's like June, July. There's a good times to take my family out camping and things like that. Like, and I don't know, like I did a few, my first year of when I really got into this. Like, if I could do it, if there was a tournament, I was going to drive to it, and then it's after a while, it's like, man, you're like it's just a weekend that you should be home with your family. Like this is and I talk to people a lot of times, like depending on the tournament you do, that's a Disney trip. You know what I mean? Like when you think about the money that goes into it. And things like that, and all I can think about, well, you sit there and you drink beer and you slept in a tent and you had a great time, but come like that day 2 or day 3, you're like, I'm like 37 years old. Maybe I'm being a little selfish in my endeavors, you know what I mean? And like to do that, more than once a month for for the whole season, which is what 5, 6, 7 months, depending on when it starts for you. Like it got to me pretty bad one time too. Like almost like I think it was like I was at Lake George this past season, and like it was when KBF started doing those 2 days, and I almost didn't fish the second day. If I wasn't at Lake George, I probably would have went home. But Lake George was only like 3 or 4 hours from my house, and so as soon as I got done fishing, I drove home. But still, at the same time, it's like you start to feel a little guilty, and then you start thinking, like, well, is it really that important for me to be doing this that often? So like this year, I was kind of like you. I'm like, pick a trail, pick it for the right reasons. Look at where they're at, and think about what you could do with these events, and if they're kind of closer to the way you fish. And that's kind of how I made up my season this year.
Yeah, my very first season I fished, I made that mistake. I had a new baby at home. I was traveling to Arkansas like every, I don't even know how often those were. I mean, but one trip, I would get up at like 2 or 3 in the morning after working till like 11 o'clock at night. I'd get up at like 2 or 3. I'd drive to Arkansas. I'd fish all day. I'd drive back. It'd be like 5 hours one way, so I'm pretty much gone, from the night before through that whole day. Then I've got to sleep, get up, and do those types of things. And so I just felt like I overdid it. Not because, I don't know, as far as fishing goes and outdoors, that's like kind of a passion of mine. So it's real easy for me to get like in the habit of wanting to do it all the time. I don't want to say obsess over it, but it's really easy to get caught up in just doing it all the time and not thinking about other things. But I really think I overdid it. And so that was a lot of not just a learning experience as far as fishing goes, but like time management is a big thing. And so it's one of those things you probably don't really think about. Most people don't in a day-to-day, like time management and how important that is. But once you have a family, obviously the priorities change. And I kind of made that mistake my first year and decided I didn't want to do that anymore. And so even after the first year, I actually kind of quit just tournament fishing. I'm just like, well, I can fish locally and I'll make YouTube videos and do that. And then, at that time I was a father. I had 2 jobs and I was trying to shoot content all the time for YouTube. So it's like, again, I got caught in the habit of fishing, even though it wasn't traveling all the time. It was, okay, if I'm not out fishing, filming locally, then I'm at home on the computer editing, doing that stuff, and still, trying to make time for family. I just wasn't doing a good job at it.
Yeah, and it's tough because it's like you said, like it's like the time management. You really don't think about how much time. I guess a lot of times you don't. I guess you don't think about how important a weekend is, right? Like you don't like, I'm just gonna go fishing this weekend. I'm just gonna go fishing, and then you end up fishing Saturday and Sunday, but you don't realize that, like, okay, well, now you gotta go back to work 4 or 5 days, for the next 4 or 5 days, and and those are 8 to 12-hour days depending on your shift. Plus your wife works an 8-hour shift, and then it's like, Jesus Christ, did I see my wife this week? You know what I mean? It's just like, and that's been a big thing that I've had to deal with over the last year, because my wife works shift work and I work shift work, and I love fishing, but at some point it's like, you're being an asshole because, like that's, the fishing, I'm not gonna do it forever. You know what I mean? It's not going to really give me the kind of, the things that I get out of my wife and my children and things like that. So a lot of times I've had to like you need to really be careful with the time, because you only have so much of it, and you can only put so much here, so much there, because remember, you still got to sleep and do all those other weird things that you got to do. So I know I'm like you, like the time management part has been like the hardest curve, but it's been the most important one that I've had to, like, you have to deal with it or not. Like these things that we love in life and we enjoy in life, they won't be there if you're not careful.
Right. And just like you, I saw your little one. I've got little ones too. At some point in life, it's going to be about spending time with them to teach them,
right,
fishing and hunting, or the things that you want to pass down and pass on to them. Doesn't mean that you're not doing that now, but obviously, that's one more thing that's taken away that time to kind of pass on those things and life skills and life lessons to the children. And so that's something that's in the back of my mind too. It's like, eventually I probably am not going to be able to tournament fish forever.
right.
It's not something that I do for a living, unfortunately. But I've got little ones that are growing up, and like you said, it happens quick. It happens super quick. And I don't want to miss out on that. And I don't want them to miss out on that and feel like that I've put them aside to fish. Because as much as I enjoy fishing as that, it's like my primary focus is being a good father to my kids. So,
Yeah, exactly.
If it's something that's going to take away from that, then I have to reevaluate that. So I think that's why time management is very important, is being able to juggle those things. So you're not necessarily having to give up one thing for another, but you're able to kind of compromise so that you're doing, for me, it's family first and then fishing second. And so that you're able, there's a good medium there. And if you can find that, I think is good. but what that looks like for me might look different for you or somebody else who's got a
Yeah,
family.
exactly.
So I'm not saying, hey, all you people that have families, and if you go out and fish all the time and you guys can do that, I'm not saying anybody's like
Right.
wrong for that. It's just it's going to be a different scenario for everybody
Yeah.
based on
I mean,
their situation.
people got to live with their own choices. So, I mean, but to me, it's always been like you don't want to play like I don't mind playing catch up and fishing. You know what I mean? Like obviously, I got years and years I got to learn to get as good as some of these other people are. But I never want to play catch up to my family. You know what I mean? Like try to get back those things. And like you said, as the kids get older and they start playing sports, well, whose time is more important at this point? Like their time as they're developing and playing sports and doing these things and going to dance, whatever they're doing. It's like, well, whose time is more important now? So I don't want to be too much, but I'm like you. It's just like those are some of the things that you got to think about. But it doesn't mean you can't. I don't think that you can't do this. You just like you said, we got to prioritize our time and and be strategic with how we want to do it. If it's something you want to do, but I don't know. It's
Yeah, that's different for everybody. Not everybody's got 3 kids. Some people may have 1 kid and they're, stay-at-home mom or something, or whatever their scenario. I mean, it's different for everybody. I can only speak for me, and that's where my priorities and things are as far as that go. I mean, I like you. I don't work shift work, but at the time when I started, I worked one way. It was an hour and a half drive to work at that time. And so, I'd spend, I'd have to leave a little bit early before the sun comes up, and I'm getting home after the sun comes down. On top of that, then I go fishing on the weekends, YouTube and stuff like that. So it just wasn't practical or feasible. So I had to kind of really take a step back and focus on the family and reevaluate how I could manage my time better to still be, a good father and be able to kind of have those hobbies and things like that. But, it's not an easy thing to do, and it takes time. And I can tell you, no matter how much you think you're good at managing time, you will always run into something along the road that you're just like, there's just sometimes, even though you think you're good at time management, there's stuff that comes up that you didn't consider in that equation, your time management. Right. And fortunately for me now, since the pandemic came, I work from home now, so I don't have to really worry about travel as far as to an office or anything anymore. And that became a permanent change. So I've actually got to spend a lot more time with my kids doing that during the week. So I can pick my daughter up from school, drop her off at school. I can spend time with my son and those types of things. So,
well, cool, man. I know, like we got to wrap this thing up. We both got families that we got to go back to after this. And so, one thing, I just got my first Old Town kayak. I got the big water. Excited to try it out tonight or tomorrow. So tell me how you got in the Old Town, why you love Old Town, and then I'll let you think what you want to think, and then we'll get out of this thing. All right?
Okay, cool. So it's funny because I follow you on Instagram. I saw that, and so saw that post, and it's funny because you had that picture because I figured you already knew, but seriously though, I did have somebody a couple weeks ago that was out on the water pedaling their kayak with the drive setting like that.
Jeez.
And that just kind of happens sometimes. People just buy it and they don't necessarily see like a floor model or something like that, or it doesn't really dawn onto them. So I just want to make sure people are doing that. But so when I started kayak fishing, I started out with a native Propel Slayer 13. I later went to like a couple Hobie PA14s, and then I had a Predator PDL up until I think April of last year. Then I switched over to the Old Town Sportsman 120 PDL. I have a 106 powered by Minn Kota also, which is a pretty fun kayak, but not all tournaments allow the motor stuff yet. So I've stuck with the PDL because then I don't have to switch stuff back and forth to do that. But I saw that your Big Water. The Big Water is a rebrand of the Sportsman. I mean, of the Predator PDL. So it's the newer version. It's the 2020. It's now called the Big Water. Great boat. I actually enjoyed my Predator PDL when I had it. The thing is that I travel a lot solo, and it's a kind of a heavy boat. So it got kind of burdensome. I've already got a bad back for the military, so just like loading and lifting that thing all the time just became, there'd be days I'd fish, I'd load it up, and then I might be down for a day to do it just because my back was just, killing me from the pain and stuff like that. So as far as bigger waters and stability, I just don't think there's anything on the market that can beat it for the price. I downsized to the 120, which is so the numbers represent how long the kayaks are. So The big water is 13 feet. And then it's is it 136?
Yeah, 13 point. Yeah, yeah. The
Yeah,
one.
okay,
Yeah,
so it's
yeah.
13 and a half feet. And then the Sportsman 120 is 12 feet, and then the 106 is 10 foot 6 inches or 10 and a half feet. So I dropped down about a foot and a half. You lose a little bit of storage space, and I would say a little bit of the stability that you get with the wider, heavier kayak. But ultimately, for me, it's been a great switch. It's lighter. I don't feel like I've lost a ton of speed, which I'm not out there racing anyways on the kayak. I need something that's going to, I feel safe in and stable in, and it's going to allow me to stand up, fish, do those types of things. So I settled on before I was on the Old Town team, I actually had an Old Town kayak. And I ended up settling on that one because at the time when I had first bought my native kayak, I didn't really like it at the time, just because it was new, not because it was new, but at the time you had to buy all the accessories for it. So you spent all this money on the kayak. You had to buy a hatch. They didn't come with a hatch at the time. You had to buy the rudder upgrade, which I think a lot of people still have to buy that nowadays on them. It just really wasn't. I didn't like the design of the rudder on that. It's mounted. It's connected to the bottom of the kayak, and it goes left and right, and you can't raise it out of the water. So it's just some things I didn't really enjoy that. I enjoyed the Hobies. They were very. I liked the storage at the time, though. They didn't have reverse. They hadn't made the 360 or the 180s to do that. So I really wanted something in reverse. Plus, those were really heavy. I had a trailer. I didn't really like having a trailer. That's just when I bought them. They came with the trailer. I bought them off of a guy. And for me, kayaking is really about just being able to kind of throw it in the back of the truck, go down and do that. If I got a trailer, then at that point I might as well just, in my mind, I might as well just go with a boat because they're pulling a trailer anyways. But so I ended up settling on the Old Town because it was lighter than the Hobie. It had reverse, had more storage options than I had. They had storage under the seat. They had storage on the back of the seat. They had the side things. They had in the front, the back. I mean, it was a perfect kayak. It was stable. You could stand up on it. You could do everything that I needed for fishing. And so to me, there's just really nothing that beats that. On top of that, they just have really great customer service. I think that's one thing that people kind of overlook when you're buying a kayak is the ability to get a hold of somebody if you ever need to get a hold of them to rectify something or to help with an issue. Now, some people are going to go through their whole fishing career and never have a single issue where they have to reach out to a company. Some people might be unfortunate they've got to reach out, on a new kayak or one that they've had for a little while. And I think it's really, really reflective of a company on the relationships that they build with their customers, but also the ability to communicate with them. And I feel like Old Town, aside from me being on the team even before for that piece, was really great about that. I mean, you could get a hold of them on social media. You could email them. You could call them up on the phone. I mean, there's never any lag time in their responsiveness to you or their ability to kind of help solve the situation. And even if it was something that maybe was your fault and not so much like a fault of the kayak or something like that, they were still pretty willing to work with you on those things because ultimately their goal was to have a satisfied customer and somebody that's a part of what I call the Old Town family. Because to me, it feels more like a family because pretty much anybody that you meet that owns one that's got that, they're going to be open to you. They're going to be responsive, anything they can do to help you. I think even when you got it, when I commented on there, welcome to the family.
Yeah. Yeah, it was Jeff to help put me in. It was a lot of people. Like the reason I got into the Old Town was like when I was looking because I wasn't happy with who I had before. It wasn't like nothing serious, but it's like those little things that you like, okay, storage space and things like that. And I was like, plus I wanted something bigger because I flipped mine last year in these big waters up here, and it's just like, but it was like it's guys like Jeff and Casey, and then the whole bunch of people. It's like everyone I talked to, they love these kayaks and they love the company, and then I was able to talk to someone. It's just like, all right, I like the vibes here.
It's funny you say that you flip that because here's a fun fact, and I've talked about this on one of my episodes on so I made a video on YouTube called the best pedal kayak for fishing, and it's not a plug for Old Town or anything like that. I'm straight up. I tell the audience, hey, I'm pro staff with Old Town. That doesn't mean that that's the right kayak for you. I give them the whole spiel. I kind of go over some different brands and kayaks for that. But the funny part about that is every kayak that I've had, with the exception of the Hobie, because it's so big and I didn't have them very long, And the Predator PDL, I've flipped every kayak I've been in, uh, at least once, whether it be on a river, whether it be in the middle of the lake, whatever. And you know, when I had my when I had my native Slayer Propel, I fell out of that trying to net like a 3-pound smallmouth one time. I just leaned over too far, and it just tilted just enough that threw me right in the water. I lost my net, lost my pole, lost the fish, uh, lost everything. So yeah, so that was a big thing for me is stability, because I have pretty good balance, and you get better balance the more you use a kayak, the more you get comfortable with it and learn kind of where to sit and kind of not to overreact to like stuff. Like you kind of know like, hey, if the kayak tips this way, your body will kind of naturally kind of lean, not with it over time. It'll, you know, naturally your reflexes will become to lean against it to kind of help keep that. Because 106 is a lot smaller, and I'd say it's probably just as stable as the 120. It's a little less stable because it's not as big, but it's the smaller kayaks, when you hit stuff, it can have a different impact than like a bigger kayak if you hit it. So when I first got that kayak, I'd run it through, and I've got a lake here that's kind of sets up like Lake Fork. It's got stumps and things like that. And I didn't see it, and I hit a stump, and I mean, I just ran my kayak on the side of the stump, and I was setting like this, just stuck on the stump, you know. And before I'd probably freak out and grab, but you know, just the experience over the years of doing it, I knew, hey, I'm just going to lean on this side, you know, lean towards where it's about to tilt. And then, you know, I was able to ease off of it without flipping it or losing anything or doing that. But ultimately, I think Old Town has the best platform for mostly what a bass angler needs. I don't think any kayak on the market has everything that you need as a bass angler. I don't think any kayak maker is ever going to have every feature, everything that you want. But I think with the features they do have, and the customer service that they have, that makes up for any small feature that maybe you wish it had that it didn't. And now, most of the time, there's enough DIY groups or videos online that if you don't have something, that you can kind of make that. Another big thing that's going on too is like 3D printing. So like a lot of stuff can be 3D printed nowadays to kind of retrofit out kayaks and do those types of things. So it's really evolved from back when it was even 4 or 5 years ago when I first got into it, about the things that you can do and the features that kayaks have. And so I really think you're going to enjoy the big water. If you haven't got out on it, I really do think you're going to feel a lot more, I don't want to say safe, but you're going to feel a lot more stable, especially the first time you go to stand up on that. You're going to be like, okay, you know, I wouldn't recommend getting too crazy since it's still cold where you're at, you know, because there's still that, you know, there's still a chance that, you know, it's harder. I would say, and I'm not just saying this because I'm on the pro staff. Honestly, I would say with Old Town, the way that their kayaks are built, you have a higher chance of you falling in the water before the kayak flips.
Okay.
I'm not saying the kayak can't flip, but the stability and the amount of give that they have, it takes a lot to flip them. It really does. But the cool thing is if you do flip it, the drive floats. So, you know, you're not worried about fishing your drive out of the bottom. The drive will float. The storage compartment, you know, keeps air in it when it's closed, so it acts as a flotation device. Right. So, one thing going out though that I would recommend if you haven't already is like getting some tethering stuff down. Not because I think that you will, but that's also something that's very overlooked, that I overlooked a lot when I first started fishing, was like tethering. Most people think, well, I just need the tethers in case I flip, but no, that's not it. It's like if you're going like you talked about, if it gets caught on a tree branch can pull your rod and reel right out of the rod holders. Especially down the south, we fish at a lot of trees and stuff that are overhanging. I mean, I broke a rod down at Lake Fork getting it hung up in a tree. On that. And so it's just stuff that you don't really think about, or you've done it so much that you know that your stuff is gonna hit up against trees or brush. I mean, where kayaks go, we've got to be prepared to get up in the trees and stuff, because that's part of the advantage of being in a kayak. We can go places that you can't really go in a boat, and some of that requires, you know, tree limbs or whatever like that. So you know, rod leashes and tethers are really good, not so much for the fact of flipping, but just for the fact of like I said, stuff can get caught up. Wind can pick up sometimes and catch your pole the wrong way, depending how it is. There's just a lot of factors that people just don't consider or think about if they've never had them. I can't tell you the amount of stuff I've lost in the middle of the lake fishing in Oklahoma just because the wind picks up from 5 miles per hour to like 45, just out of nowhere, and then blowing. I've lost a bunch of hog troughs before just from the wind picking them up and throwing them, and they don't float. And so it's just making stuff float. And like I said, you mentioned a good thing about that. Obviously, your life vest, you're going to have that, but just making sure you have stuff down. It's really good that you're going to have that storage, because the bungees on the back of that kayak are going to help you hold down.
So good. That's my favorite part. Yeah, that's my favorite part so far. Or the bungee, like where the back where you can put the crate at, the way that bungee comes up. It's like my other kayak didn't have that, and the bungees that did have got crazy like whatever. Just wasn't like that, and like that's already made me happy, because it's just like I can lock down a good port. Because when my kayak flipped last year, I was only able to save what I could get under the boat and catch before I went to the bottom of the lake. And so, that's a big deal.
Yeah, I've lost a ton of tackle in those flipping. Fortunately, I'm not. So this was like the first year. So there's a couple things we talked about, and sorry, we'll just talk. It's fine. You got some time if you've got it. Was fish finder. So this was the first year, like you're saying, this is the first year that I've used a fish finder. I've done all my bass fishing without a fish finder. When I had those Hobies for a short period of time, they had depth finders on them. I didn't really know how to use them, but I found myself spending more time trying to learn how to use them than actually fishing at the time. So I cut those back out and just wanted to learn bass fishing, not just focus on electronics. Obviously, it's an important tool. I've used it some this year, more so for the water temp than actually trying to locate fish with it. Because in the South, a lot of fishing involves like beating the banks or shallow fishing. So the depth finders aren't going to come in handy there anyways. Like wintertime and like summertime, they really are. When the fish go deeper, they can help out. But most of the time, you're going to be able to catch fish in shallow areas. So you're not going to need that. But the water temperature helps, because then that kind of helps me focus on what baits to use or what style of fishing I need to do. For like you said, like if you go out and it's, let's say, in the 40s when you get out there on the water, then you're going to know, okay, I'm going to throw a jerk bait. I may have to finesse fish with a drop shot, maybe drag a jig if I can find them around some structure that's real low. But most of the time when it's that cold, they're kind of not necessarily all the way on the mud, but they're a little bit suspended off, but they're deep. So, and they want it real slow and real methodical. And so that's very difficult fishing. I'm still learning on the winter side fishing too. For that. But the thing I was also going to tell you is on your big water, I think you'll be surprised is what's really cool about that. And that's one thing I can still kind of do it on the Sportsman 120, but I keep stuff in the front now. Like I keep like a first aid kit, like safety gear, like my bibs or rain jackets and stuff like that. I keep that tucked in the front because the weather changes. And that's one thing about fishing national that's different than fishing locally. It's like you never know what the weather is going to be where you're going, and you don't know how the weather is at most of these places because you've not been to a lot of those states, or you've not fished there a lot. But is storage inside the kayak. You can actually store your rods inside your kayak. The way that that's designed in the front hatch, you can actually lay those down and push them all the way to the back, and so then you have rod storage on the front of your kayak as well, which is really good for like tournaments and stuff. If you're traveling, you don't have a lot of room, like say left in your truck or something like that, to be able to put those in the kayak. It just creates another level of storage. But, I think that's also important. That goes along with the tournament thing, is being able to really store stuff in a methodical way that you're maximizing the space on everything, and being organized when you're doing that.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. So. All right, well, man, I appreciate you coming on the show. I think we covered a lot of cool stuff, man. I'm glad I got here to talk to you. I know we've been trying to do this for like a few months, but just never worked out.
I'm sorry about that. When you reached out, I really wanted to get to it, but it was just one of those times between like work and like everything going on. I had some personal stuff going on, so it was just, it's just one of those things. Life gets up, but I'm glad that we were able to I'm glad you hit me up today, actually, because I actually had some time to get this and show up on the show, and I'm glad I got to do that with you, because I've been watching for a little while and wanting to do it. I just, it's finding time.
I mean, well, why don't you go ahead now? If you want to plug anything, where people can follow you, if you want to thank anyone that makes fishing easier for you, but this is kind of like just your moment.
Sure. First off, I want to say thank you to Old Town, being part of their pro staff and being part of the family. They've been a huge supporter of mine and helping make this possible. I want to give a shout out to two of our team members that we lost, Kwanzaa Henderson and Ben Spangler. They're no longer with us, but I'm confident where they're at now. They're just fishing great waters and catching tons of great fish. But if you guys want to follow me on social media, Okie12, OHKEE12. I primarily do YouTube, but I am on Instagram as well. Those are the two platforms I use the most. So if you guys want to tune in for that, please feel free to do that. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Pretty easy to get a hold of, and happy to answer any questions or anything like that.
Well, cool, man. Appreciate you coming on. Good luck with the rest of the season, and I'm sure we'll talk again in the near future.
All right. Thanks, buddy. Good luck.